Everdark, Episode 79, Reasons Why. Last on Everdark, Balthazar interrogates Daemon, delving deep into his mind, only to discover that he and the Kaly vampire have more in common than either of them would have ever guessed. The mist drifted through the trees, curling around their trunks in almost lovers' caresses and leaving a kiss of moisture behind. The immortal Kaly remained motionless on the tree branch. He stared unblinking at his prey. It was a night hag who was standing before a small pool of black water. The red and white moons of Everdark were reflected in the water's depths. She cooed as she leaned over to make a cup of one of her long-fingered hands and brought the water to withered lips and yellowed fangs. She made a disgusting, slurping noise as she drank and washed the blood of her prey from her lips. It was the cycle. There were times when she was a predator, and times, like now, when she was prey. How long before Damon knocks on my door? His threat to the Harrows would not keep the immortal king away forever, no matter how softened he might be by having a fledgling finally. Damon was never one to back down from a fight or accept defeat, and he never let a challenge go unanswered. The night hag dipped her hand into the water again. A yellow gold leaf, slightly curled at the edges, slipped into her palm along with the water. She regarded it. Though dying, dead, it was still beautiful. He wondered if the hags knew what beauty was. He wondered if they knew what ugliness was, for they epitomized that. She twitched the leaf out of her palm and drank again. He adjusted his stance just barely, and her head lifted in alarm. She looked right and left and behind her, but not up. He'd been tracking her for an hour now. It was since Damon had used Armageddon against the Order. He had felt the ripple of vampires lost to him. He did not have the Eiros ability to read minds, but all immortals were connected to all of the vampires in their bloodline. He felt them go, like smoke blown away on the wind. If Damon was already powerful enough to do that after his long starvation, entering lasting would be easy. And he entered solace somehow. He could simply do whatever he did there to get here. Only my holding of the Harrows' souls is keeping him at bay. For now, Kaly felt the heat of the 2 gems in his waistcoat pocket. The Harrows' strength was tremendous. They had been willful people when alive. That served them well in death. It allowed them to focus and evade him. He was certain that Joanna Harrow had communicated to Christian, a speaker to the dead of all things. She hadn't denied it, but she told him nothing, no matter how he had hurt her or her husband. The 2 of them were of one mind, to resist him at all costs. When he had realized that Daemon had killed them, but kept their souls, his rage had burned hot within him. He had been so tempted to thrash his fledgling for his impudence. But then he'd cooled, as he considered that Daemon had done the right thing. He'd done it for himself, of course, not Kaly, but still, it had been the right thing. Now he could almost feel warmth towards his Daemon. Almost. The night hag's thin, rotten lips writhed back from her fangs, and she hissed low in her throat. She'd scented some more prey, evidently. But she was still thirsty, so she remained at the pool. Kaly stepped off the branch. His booted feet landed squarely on the night hag's bent back. She bowed underneath him. Her head snapped back and she let out a shrill scream. Kaly could have broken her spine, but he was going to draw this out. Because once he killed the night hag, he would need to return to his people and answer the questions they had. Soothe the fear. Kaly vampires did not show emotions easily, but he could read every one in their faces, the set of their shoulders, the slight pauses before they spoke. It was intolerable to him. The night hag reached back with her clawed hands and swiped at him. He easily avoided those black-tipped nails. Scratches from the hag wouldn't kill him, but the poison in them caused painful pustules to form and burst. Not even vampire healing could completely keep the reaction from starting. But Kaly was like a graceful bull rider as he effortlessly kept hold of the night hag while she thrashed. Her black-tipped claws came within a hair's breadth of his left cheek, but he moved back just in time. The whoosh of air was almost a caress. He dug his heels into her bony sides. She let out another shriek and reared back. He saw the reflection of their battle in the black mirror of the water. The body he wore was angelic in face and form. Even he had to admit the boy was beautiful who stared back at him. He had chosen this body because it made people underestimate him until it was too late. But this wouldn't work with Damon. Damon knew him down to his soul, so he would not be moved by an innocent face. He wouldn't care that Kaly looked like a young teenager who had barely experienced life. He wouldn't see him with any pity, not anymore. He reached down and grasped the hag's head in both of his hands. She thrashed. He could feel the saliva on her chin, slick and unpleasant. He felt her hot breath and the snap of her teeth as she tried to bite his fingers. A bite from a night hag was worse than a scrape of those claws. He'd actually seen such a bite kill a Kaly vampire in a week. They'd become a formless mass of boils, pustules, and pain. He'd been the one to end their suffering and use their soul. Kaly snapped the night hag's neck. She collapsed beneath him. He stepped off of her remains. She was more like a bundle of bones and rags than an actual person. There were rumors that before immortals had come to the Everdark, that the hags were beautiful women, but he doubted that. The Everdark was more deadly than the immortals even were. It lived and breathed its darkness. This night hag had simply gotten too close to his people and had to be eliminated. He had to re-establish the balance. The gems within his waistcoat grew warmer. He took them out, one in each hand, and closed his eyes. He opened the gems and his eyes at the same time. Before him stood the Harrows. Jack Harrow had given his son the strong jaw and the sharp planes of his cheeks, the broad forehead. Joanna Harrow had given Julian the plush lips and those same eyes. The two of them regarded him with suspicion, but then, as if it were planned, their expressions smoothed away to show nothing. "What do you want?" Jack asked, hands on hips, as if Kaly were an unwanted visitor to their imprisonment, even though this was the only time he could see his wife. That they loved one another in a true and deep way was unmistakable. Kaly had scoffed at such love before, but the Harrows were making him question that. "You are mine. I can do whatever I want," Kaly reminded him. Jack stared at him steadily. "You're our jailer. You can never truly possess us." Kaly gave him a mirthless laugh. "I have not even begun to show you how false that sentiment is." Joanna stepped forward.
"You haven't brought us out here to do that, have you?"
She studied his face. It was eerie how good she was at reading him.
"No, you haven't. You're feeling alone. You need to talk to someone, and we're the only ones you can talk to."
"You think I seek empathy from you?" He let an eyebrow curl upwards. "Or your counsel?" His lips twitched into a smirk. "You lived what? A few decades? What great wisdom do you have exactly to offer?"
"We know our son better than you do,"
Joanna said, ignoring his insulting words.
"and that is who you want to speak of, I'm guessing. He's the one that's closest to Damon right now, after all."
"You knew him as a boy. You do not know the man. How could you know what draws Damon in?" Kaly asked. "We have always known the man our son would become," Jack answered, and he sounded so sure. Kaly bowed his head and pursed his lips. These were people who had made a living avoiding dangers. They had learned to make snap judgments about people because their lives depended upon it. One had to be certain, even if one was wrong, to take the next step. But he sensed that they were likely right about their son. "You delivered my message to Christian, did you not? I'm sure with words of your own," Kaly said to Joanna.
"I did as you asked,"
she said simply. "What will your son's reaction to your continued existence on this plane be?" Kaly had asked this before, umpteen times before, but he wanted to get every variable out of them.
"He'll want to rescue us,"
she answered truthfully.
"Who wouldn't want to rescue their parents?"
"But you made clear how foolish and vain such an attempt would be," Kaly said more than asked. She nodded.
"I did, but it won't stop my son from coming here and bringing Damon with him."
That was true as well. "Even though he risks your utter destruction?" Kaly asked.
"I don't believe you can do that. I don't think anyone can do that,"
she answered. "We will see our son again, no matter what you do to us," Jack concurred, again with that certainty. You haven't experienced death like I have. You have no idea what is out there, he reminded them.
How can an immortal being understand death at all? You move between bodies like a change of clothes. What's death to you? It must be completely inexplicable.
Joanna argued. She suddenly looked off into the distance as if she glimpsed something.
You can't go through the gate that we can.
No, he couldn't. It repelled him. Not that he wanted to go through it. He just simply did not like that something existed like that which he could not explore and return from. Does it call to you? He was always curious what souls, especially souls as powerful and pure as the Harrows were, experienced with the gate. She nodded slowly.
Yes, it beckons us on to another adventure, but...
But you won't go, even if I let you go. Kaly finished for her. Because Julian is going to remain on this side of the gate forever. Our son has a life without us, Jack answered, but this time not as certainly. He's built his existence on the loss of yours, Kaly pointed out. He shifted from foot to foot, and he accidentally dislodged one of the night hag's arm bones. Already her desiccated skin had completely dissolved into nothingness, leaving thin, dry, twig-like bones behind in some foul-smelling rags.
He's building something new,
Joanna argued.
An adventure that is just as compelling. Our son will go on.
You are not as certain of that as you make out. Kaly let a slow smile cross his face. We're his parents. We want him to be happy. We fear he will be sad or hurt or many things. But we know that Julian can and will survive, and do so on his own, Jack said.
You would be better off, instead of threatening our son, to ask for his forgiveness and help,
Joanna said. She gathered her hands in front of her, curling them into fists. Kaly's eyes widened, and his bitter amusement could not be ignored as he said, Forgiveness?
Yes, forgiveness. He could intercede on your behalf with Damon and...
You think Damon would let all of this be forgotten and forgiven simply because Julian asks him to? Kaly's right eyebrow raised.
You thought that threatening us would stop Damon. So why not the opposite?
Joanna asked. He doesn't forgive. He certainly doesn't forget. Not that I should need either, Kaly remarked, his eyes narrowing. What is between the two of you? Jack studied his face. Why are you so angry with him? Kaly contemplated whether to answer him or not. It mattered little what these people thought. His reasons were his own. Could they even understand his position? Why Damon deserved this and so much more? Perhaps not. But they had been right in that they were the only ones he could speak to. There is balance in all things, Kaly said. Life and death are constantly taking and giving. He made his hands into scales. He dropped one down very low. When that balance is thrown off, chaos floods in. Unexpected and unwanted consequences occur. The whole system can and will collapse unless balance is restored. Kaly brought his hands up level again.
Damon was the balance.
Joanna's forehead furrowed.
And he went away, which caused an imbalance.
Yes, without him, the other immortals allowed their vices to run wild, which led to a war. Kaly began to pace in a tight line. Without Damon's balancing influence, there was nothing to stop things from tipping over into chaos. Were you one of the ones who let their vices run wild? Jack asked dryly. His eyes were narrowed at Kaly. No, Kaly answered simply. It is not that I do not have any, but due to my gifts, I must control myself. And baiting Damon now is controlling yourself? Jack scoffed. Kaly paused in his pacing and glared at Jack. You do not understand why I am doing what I am doing. I am trying to explain. If you do not wish to hear.
Jack?
Joanna said her husband's name repressively. She turned back to Kaly. Her expression was intense.
Please, go on.
Jack pressed his lips together but said nothing. He respected his wife greatly. As I was saying, balance. Kaly began and gathered his thoughts. He started pacing again. So the war came. We nearly wiped out humanity with it. Jack's forehead puckered. There's nothing in our histories to indicate such a near ending. Unless...
The Black Death?
Joanna gasped. That was a disease. Jack countered. That can't... We can make you think, remember, believe anything. Though we did not have Eiros then, there were enough of his bloodline to do what we needed to do. Remember that information did not pass so quickly like it does now. He reminded them. The fact that information could pass around the world many times in seconds was amazing to him. So how much of our history is false? Jack was scowling. Does it matter? Kaly smiled. Of course it does. We believe things. We act on things based upon our past. If that past isn't true, history is written by the victors. It is not true. It is what people want you to believe. In this case, it was written by vampires, but it changes nothing. Kaly spread his arms wide.
You mean you wrote it?
Joanna was frowning at him now. Someone had to re-establish order. Kaly stopped in mid-step and held up a hand. Death had the upper hand. There were so many souls clogging the world. The gate was breaking open more and more. I could see how it would be. His voice drifted off.
You truly thought that things were going to collapse?
Joanna asked, but her expression was more tender, as if she believed him. I knew they were. So what did you do to stop this collapse? Jack asked. Many things, but the first of which was to push my fellow immortals from their bodies, those that had to go for a time, so things could be set up appropriately. Kaly knew he was preening slightly, but it was brilliant. They had never suspected his ability to shove them out of their bodies like he removed himself from his. While they had all now gathered bodies, many did not know who they actually were. Some even thought they were mortals. His lips compressed. Those would soon have their powers coming online as Damon had returned. He affected everything. So you took out your fellow immortals. Then what? Jack's arms were crossed over his chest. His loyal soul did not like such betrayal. I did try reasoning with them, Jack, but they would not listen. I am not a great orator like Eiros. Kaly pressed his lips together. He had been roundly ignored and even mocked, though he had tried to explain to the others what he was seeing. So I had to take steps.
You eliminated the immortals. Go on.
Joanna prodded. Humans need a mythology. It calms them. It makes them feel that things are in their place. So I created the Order. He smiled. The name was so obvious as to what it was, yet the vampires had eaten it up and showed it such reverence, even though it had been filled with lies. But that had been necessary for him to re-establish balance, to heal some of the wounds that were made by his fellow immortals.
But now Damon is back. Why are you hanging on to the Order? Why aren't you happy?
Joanna asked. Kaly's eyes narrowed. He was about to say something when suddenly in the blackness of the water, he saw Damon's face. He quickly reeled in the Harrows souls into the gems and put both in his pockets. The face in the water was still there. It was Damon. Damon's red eyes tracked Kaly as he slowly circled the pool. It is me, Kaly, Damon said. His voice was as rich and glorious as Kaly had remembered it. That wild feeling of loss filled Kaly for a moment, but he clamped it down. How are you doing this? Kaly asked as he stopped at the very edge of the pool. He kept an inch between himself and the water. This was not something he recalled Damon being able to accomplish. You do not know all my abilities, Kaly. Damon tilted his head to the side. A dark curl fell across his sensitive forehead. But you should guess this. You are in the Everdark. Everything in the Everdark is me. You know this, or have you forgotten? I thought you exaggerated, Kaly admitted. When you were asleep, the Everdark did not seem to care. It went on without you. We all went on without you. Those red eyes hooded for a moment. Nothing went on without me, Kaly. I was always here, just sleeping. If I were truly gone, believe me, all would know. Kaly stared at that beloved face. What do you wish to discuss? I want you to stop this defiance, Kaly. Damon looked at him sternly. Nothing good will come of it. I have the Harrows souls. If you come to lasting, I will destroy them. You know that I am not one to make empty threats. He tipped his chin up. Damon's eyes burned sulphurously, and I am not one to take such an action lightly. Do not make me destroy all that you have built. Your return is doing that, sending us into chaos again, Kaly said with an angry shake of his head. I will establish true order, not this false religion you have created, Damon told him. If you value such peace, you should surrender and accept punishment for your actions. Punishment? Kaly's eyes narrowed. What about your punishment? Mine. Damon tilted his head to the side. You think to just walk back in after all the damage you caused? To take over again as if you never left? To go forward without any regard to anything? Kaly sliced a hand across the air. I am king. Damon answered him simply. Kaly glared at him. You do not deserve to be king. Don't you see that? By abandoning us, you proved that. Kaly, I am king. Damon stared at him. Whether you think I am a good one or not is irrelevant. I am king. Kaly threw a stone into the pool, eradicating Damon's image. We shall see. Join us next time for episode 80, Break.
We could not do this without the support of our members and shop customers, because the money we use to pay these amazing voice actors comes directly from you. We will never have the backing of a big company like Netflix or Disney. There is no safety net for content creators like us. But on the other hand, it also means that we only have our audience to please. Consider supporting us by joining the membership for a few months or buying an audiobook from our shop. Links to those are in the notes.
The Everdark podcast by X Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thillis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.